for coming, especially for the panelists. I appreciate you guys giving your time and being willing to engage in this discourse that we're going to have today. So I thought that first we would just kind of get started by introducing yourselves. And then, I know we can see your name, but also you can introduce your name, pronouns, and then what organization you're representing. And then also share a little bit about your cultural background if you feel comfortable. So whoever would like to start first.
Okay,
I could start.
I'll go right.
All right, I'm Ricky James. I'm from the beautiful Virgin Islands. I'm here on behalf of Caribbean Student Association and pronouns he, him. That's it.
Hannah, you want to go?
I'm sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Laguerre. My pronouns are she, hers, and her. I am a senior majoring in neuroscience and behavior with a minor in psych. My family and myself is from Haiti, so we represent the Haitian culture. Is that all of it? I want to make sure I covered it all.
Were you representing a particular student org?
Yes, I am. I am the current chapter president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People here on campus. So in short, NAACP.
Thank you.
I guess I will go next. My name is Ryan Rivera. I am a junior health science major. My family and I are originally from Puerto Rico. I actually just recently transferred to FAU. I used to go to Nova Southeastern in Davie, and then I transferred up here. I'm the current vice president for my organization, Latino America Unida, Lambda Alpha Upsilon Fraternity Incorporated. And yeah, did I miss anything? Did I get everything down?
Yep, that was it. Yeah, perfect.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Tierra Broughton. I'm a senior marketing student at FAU, and I serve as the president for the Black Student Union on campus. As far as cultural background, I am African American, but you already know that gets really detailed in roots.
Cool. Thank you all for introducing. That was everyone, right? From the panel.
Also, who will be joining the panel pretty soon is Vania. She's also the event coordinator for the Black Student Union, and she also does serve in student government as a House of Representatives. So I just want to introduce her on her behalf before she comes in as well.
Thank you, Tierra. Awesome. And we can give her a chance to, when she logs on, to introduce herself. So I'm excited that there's so many different backgrounds represented. I think that will make for a really great conversation and getting to know everyone. So the purpose of this panel discussion today was to be able to talk about this mental health among BIPOC communities. And so BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. And so to get started, I have a couple of questions centered around just mental health and then getting a little bit more into what that looks like among BIPOC communities. And then just so the non-panelists, so audience members know, we are hoping to have some time towards the end for questions. So feel free along the way to type questions in the chat. We can answer questions as they come along. Or, if you have any particular questions that come up as you hear people talking, you can feel free to type them in the chat and we'll get to them towards the end. So
before we continue, can I ask a quick question, please?
Yeah.
Let me turn my camera on. Before I had registered to be in this meeting, I didn't know that you had to be representing a certain student org to be here. So I was just
you do not. This
okay. I
just a panelist. Yeah.
Okay, because I didn't know. I saw that it was supposed to be like this conversation about mental health for BIPOC people. So that was what interested me.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know.
Yeah, so you don't have to be a member from a particular student org. It was just that each panelist member is kind of from one of those organizations. And so they kind of had that background or perspective, but no, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and did you say also any other questions I have, I should wait till the end, or?
You can throw them in as they come in. So it's really just up to preference. So like, if we don't have, like, if there's no burning questions and you want to wait till the end, you can, but I wouldn't, I think it'd be fun to have more of like a, dialogue throughout. So if something comes up and you're like, oh wait, I have a thought on this, feel free to jump in if you feel comfortable talking, or if you just want to type it in the chat, you can do that too.
Okay, and the whole idea is it's just a discussion. Is that the whole? That's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions. We don't have to get through them all. Like if the conversation is really good on one, we could stick there. If you all have questions that Javon, even if you have a question that you want to throw out to the panel and you want like to have a conversation about, we can do that too. So it really is open.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
So my first question is, how do you all define mental health, and how has your perception of mental health changed over time?
I guess I will start us off. So a little bit about me and my background is I actually studied public health, specifically as a concentration at Nova. And one of our large focuses is mental health. So what we define mental health as is the combination of both your mental well-being and also your general mental wellness together. And that as a whole creates a state, which is your mental health. So you can have positive or negative. Personally, to myself, it's pretty much just kind of like a check-in with myself on how I'm doing. So what's my mental health at? You know, what am I really looking at for myself? Where are there areas that I can improve? Are there additional resources that I'm not seeking out that I should seek out? Pretty much just taking that all together and using that at my disposal to bring myself further.
I'll jump in. Ryan pretty much covered the basics for me and how I define mental health, but I would like to add, it also for me, mental health has to do with my physical well-being. If I'm getting enough rest, how am I feeling for the day? If I don't feel myself feeling my best self when I wake out of bed, I know it's not going to be a good day.
Yeah.
So I kind of add my physical well-being.
Yeah, you have a mind-body connection. Yeah. Tierra?
Yeah, so for me, I think mental health just affects not only how we think, but how we act towards others as well. You know, it's a feeling that you feel within and that you spread around others. So if your mental health is affected, then it could possibly affect others as well. So that's something I look at, and that's my perception. So that's why I always try to make sure that I'm keeping my mental health at least stable, because it's, you know, it's hard for us Caucasians. We all go through different struggles in life, but I think it's really important to have self-awareness and have those days where I just focus on my well-being.
Yeah.
For me, I would say mental health is what situations forms your thought complex. And you also said how we change over time, right?
Yeah.
So I would say probably when I was younger, I always thought like I could tough it out, but I could see like as we get older and we have more obligations and stresses in life, the perception could change.
Yeah, absolutely. I was curious for some of the other members as well. Like, and now I really appreciate the awareness of like even knowing, okay, it's something that I gotta check in with myself about. Sometimes I gotta know how I'm feeling like physically. Did you all feel like you always had this awareness? Were there certain things that kind of helped you get to that point where you were able to get this definition of mental health?
So for me, I would say yes. I battled with mental health since I was as young as in second grade. I don't really like to dive into the details of what transpired with my mental health back then, but it's been a constant battle for me from like second grade to even middle and high school. I found myself in college, like learning and navigating it a bit much better than I used to in my past. So I do believe like my self-awareness started like back when I was way younger.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, Hannah. So it sounds like for you, it was more like this was a lived experience. Like this was something that you've been through, so you had to be aware from very early on.
Yeah.
I would say really similar to Hannah, except my journey was just a little bit later than hers. Mine was actually about sixth grade. And it was kind of pretty much the same thing, that since that young age, you know, due to like different events that had occurred, I didn't really have a word for it then as mental health and having this awareness of needing to check in with myself. But once I actually started going through the schooling systems, especially in higher education, and forcing myself to kind of attend those panels and those classes that maybe I wouldn't have normally attended to learn more about that, that's kind of when I started to get that awareness, especially because within my family and within our culture, mental health is very much stigmatized, and you are kind of given this big target that's put on you and this big sign that says, look at me, whenever you say that you want to reach out for mental health resources and help. So I would definitely say that it was really scary at first to kind of openly admit that I had that awareness that, you know, maybe I do need to reach out to other people. But, you know, I would say that with time, it has progressively gotten better.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And that led me into my next question, although I think I see our other panelist member. Is it Dana?
It's Vania.
Vania. Hi,
Yeah.
Vania.
How are you?
Glad you could join us. Good, good. So we just got started with the first question. So feel free to jump in as you see fit and whatever questions feel appropriate for you. So Ryan was just, sharing how he noticed that mental health was kind of stigmatized in his culture and his within the Latin community. And so I can share a little bit about my cultural background. So I'm family is from Jamaica, although I was born in the United States and have a lived experience in the United States as well. And so kind of find myself between both cultures of Jamaican culture and also African American, but very much so I feel like mental health was not something that was discussed at all as a child and when I was growing up. And that really impacted how I came to view mental health for a long time until I also went to school and that changed a little bit. And so I'm curious for you all, like, how was mental health discussed, whether in your family, your culture, and your community, if at all? What kind of messages did you hear about mental health? Go ahead, Hannah.
For me and within the Haitian community, likewise, it is also stigmatized very much so. I do see a lot more generational change now with a lot of younger Haitians and even young adult Haitians that I talk to that have been going to therapy and working on themselves. My family, personally, I didn't see them start to talk about mental health and see the seriousness of it until maybe a little bit post-COVID. And then they realized the importance of somebody's mental health and well-being. For my family, it was always you talk to God, you go to church and you pray it out. I'm not sure if anybody's religious, but that was always the case for my family. I've witnessed my mom battle her own mental health problems firsthand, and I would suggest, okay, maybe you need to go see a therapist. And she'd be like, oh no, I'm going to talk to God, or I'll talk to somebody, my grandmother or one of her siblings about it instead of seeking actual help. And then my dad's side, well, a lot of them being more in higher education, they do focus on mental health as well, but I didn't start seeing that conversation at like dinners and holidays until again, like post-COVID, during COVID. Well, not post-COVID because we haven't left, but.
Right, I get what you mean, Yeah, Vania, go ahead.
So my experience is a little similar to Hannah's. I'm Haitian American, and I would say that I started the conversation within my family. I didn't start thinking about my mental health or just having mental awareness until I started attending FAU, honestly. I learned that we have the CAPS program, and I started going, and honestly, I didn't think I needed to go at first because this wasn't something that was talked about in my household, but I just went to see, hey, what would we talk about? Were there issues that I might be having at school? And there were things that when I was with my counselor that I recognized, like, wow, these are things that we're bringing up from my childhood that we never talked about. And I felt like I grew up pretty normal. I had a nice childhood, playful childhood, but my counselor let me know, like, the way that my childhood was, the way that my parents conditioned me and my childhood really constructed my thinking and my actions. And it was just, a really big eye opener. And now I suggest to my family to attend therapy sessions as well. But I would say that I'm the catalyst of my family. I started these mental health questions with them.
I love that. That is awesome. What about you, Ryan?
I would definitely say that similar to Venia, is that how you say your name, by the way? I want to make sure that I'm saying it correctly. That it was kind of like I was the one who introduced that conversation to my family, and really similar to Hannah as well. It was kind of, oh, you need to just go pray it out, go talk with God, get right with God, and make sure, like that was the problem solver to everything, is that you need to get right with God, because if you're not right mentally, that means you're not right with God. And it took me going through certain things and finally having that real conversation with my parents and saying, I need help. I cannot do this alone. Like there's something wrong that we need to kind of connect the dots here. And it's something that you're not able to answer that question for me. And that's kind of when we started opening our minds to having discussions about mental health and actually talking about our problems. I was the first person in my entire family to ever And by my entire family, I mean the currently living and deceased bloodline to ever go to therapy. And I was the one who had actually started that change for my family. And now I have other members of my family who regularly see a therapist because they realize that they also had some things that you can't just get right with God and suddenly your problem is solved. You know, those problems are still going to be there. And I was such a big advocate, especially when I was in high school, for mental health resources, because we didn't have any really in my high school. We had 2 counselors and they pretty much would say, okay, you can take a nap in my office for this period and then you got to go back to class. And that was really the only way that you were able to talk about anything with anyone, really. And it took people in my school district. We had 2 within 2 years, 2 students commit suicide. And that was when it finally was like, okay, we need to definitely be focusing more on mental health resources and making sure that we actually have funding for that. So I don't know if any of you guys actually voted in the primary, but that was one of the big questions that was on the ballot, which is to approve funding to increase the budget in Broward County to provide additional school safety resources, but also included with that was mental health resources.
So many important points touched on just there. And like, yeah, Javon.
I have a question
Yeah.
because I keep saying this idea of religion being brought up in tandem with the discussion on mental health. And like, I forget which one of you said that it was like your parent will just choose a conversation with God over any sort of, counsel from anyone who helps with mental health. And I wanted to ask, because it like brought up in my mind the idea that like, in your guys' opinion, in what manner do mental health resources and religion aid your mental health? Because it seems like there's the implication that like religion is not at all helpful, but I feel like there's, you can help your mental health through religion and through these newer progressive ways of caring for your mental health. So I wanted to just bring those 2 ideas to your guys' attention and like see what you think with that.
It's a great question.
I-
Who would like to go?
Oh,
So I know for me, Ricky, you want to go? I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
no, you're good. I didn't know how to raise my hand, but I was like, I feel like you could do a mix of both, because if you look at the religion side and they tell you, oh, pray to God, some stuff are out of your control. So you just leave it up to fate. Like some circumstances you can't change. But there's some that you have to actively go seek. And when everybody recalled the experience, it brought me back to like a time when I told my parents for the first time, I think I want to try to go to a psychologist. They were like, a what? And I was like, a psychologist. And they were just like, go pray, boy. So it's like, and I just been close-minded about it, but over time I became more open-minded towards it. But I think it's a mix of both.
Kind of what Ricky said for me personally, although I've been battling my mental health since I was much younger, my parents were aware of it. I think for them, they didn't necessarily have the tools or know how to handle what I was dealing with. And as I get older, I recognize that a lot. Like I'm like my parents, I can't fault them because they didn't have the tools to help me when I needed the help the most. But when it comes to like spirituality, because it's very heavy within my culture itself. As a Caribbean, I know a lot of other Caribbeans on this panel could speak on that as well. I think I had to set myself away from the church. I can't tell you the last time I physically went into the church besides like Mother's Day, my mom pleading with me, or New Year's or holiday on my own will again, since I've came to college. So maybe it's like 3.5 years in since I physically like went to a church myself. I've always told myself I'm going to continue my spiritual journey on my own. I walk by the faith that I was given with the tools that I was given and that I have. But as far as like using the church itself to define my mental health, I no longer do that. I more so look at both aspects of like, okay, spirituality, this is here, this is my faith, this is where I could go to in another place of guidance. And then I also really do need this other version of spirituality when it comes to focusing on my mental health as well. you know, if that makes sense. Like you have your higher power, and then you also have like the newer versions, like you said, like the more alternative ways as well. It's just
Right.
implementing what fits for you, because for me, I use both in a sense. So it's like I still hold on to my faith and what I've took away from my faith, not like what was forced on me. And then I still use the new tools that I was given to help me progress in that.
So it's like you say, it's like you're taking your spirituality and your mental health completely into your own hands, instead of it just being completely vested in whatever your religion tells you is what you need to do.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, you know, like we all have our moral, like our moral compass and things
Our
like
ethics.
that. And a lot of times we use the faith to define that. I think it's taking what actually fits for you as the individual on what you want to follow when it comes to your ethics and your moral compass and what you believe in, and live by that guideline while also making sure you implement your mental health. So it's like, you don't, because I used to feel like I was battling the lesser of the two. Like, wow, I'm no longer in the faith and with the culture and what I was raised with and believed in. And now I feel like, okay, I'm automatically shunned and I'm sinned for it. Whereas I'm now focusing on this new version. But for me, if I know I'm living right, doing well, and I'm focusing on what I set for myself, using my moral compass and guidance, then there's nothing else I could feel negative in, because I've made my peace with the higher power myself.
Okay. Which I think that what you said speaks to the fear of social criticism that comes up with going against your religion or just anything that your parents give you. But I think that what you say, like just taking it upon yourself, it sounds like, in my mind, the most sensible way to care for yourself mentally, because it's kind of like you're filling in the holes where like the utility of your religion, you know, you're filling in those gaps yourself with other things, and you're just, you know, kind of forgetting about the things in your religion that you don't feel like are useful for you.
Like, for me, I still hold on to what I think is useful and what I'm not, but I came to peace with, like, for me, religion is man-made from years before I was created. So it's like, who am I to say, yes, for instance, a lot of us have the Bible, whether it's named like the Quran and different things within different cultures,
Right.
as the stepping stone and the guideline. For me, I had to realize, like, okay, this is my, like, you know, my guidance and my rule and my day-by-day book, but I also have to take into account this was created by man. You have the King James Version, and I'm a history nerd a little bit. So King James Version, when that came into play, that was a nasty time in history. Let's be realistic. You had these kings sleeping with wives, beheading their wives, living in a life of sin. And I'm like, who are you to tell me how to live based off of this Bible if you weren't living the way you were trying to preach, you know, or present yourself? So I really think
the ethics they live by is what they use to judge their writing of this book, which is now at this point thousands or millions, I don't even know, very old and not necessarily reflective of our values right now.
I say you could still use it as a guidance, like to go back to for wisdom or inspiration, because a lot of the things that are written in there does still hit home today. You see history repeats itself a lot of the times. So there's still a lesson and a message in those words. It's how you interpret that message and how you choose to use that message, whether it is a good message or a negative message. For me, I didn't absolutely like dismiss the negativity that came out of, like, you know, the religion in the Bible, but I keep an eye on it and I'm aware of it and I acknowledge it. How I choose to operate around that is now based off of me and the peace that I've made with the higher power when it comes to it.
Okay.
Pretty much just to back up Ricky and Hannah, it's kind of like taking it into your own perspective and looking at it. Personally, myself, I'm a Catholic, so I don't think that there's any shame in using religion as a way to better your own mental health, especially because it's your mental health. You know yourself the best. And if it's something that's working for you, then absolutely, by all means. But I think the issue becomes where, especially from parents pushing this onto younger children, where, you know, a child is seeking out assistance or seeking out help, and the first answer is to turn to God. Well, after so many times of turning to God and you still have the same problems, then it becomes, well, now this person wants to disconnect from religion and distance themselves completely, and they're left with zero resources. So I think that it's completely healthy and okay to combine religion with those more progressive methods in order to solve mental health issues, because at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with chemical imbalances. And those aren't just things that you can solve by reading a religious text or by meeting with a group of people, multiple times throughout the week in order to talk about it and to pray about it. That's something that many times not many people choose to do it, but it is something that's available, that you do need medication and you need to seek a psychiatrist, because it gets to a point where there's certain chemical imbalances that just can't be solved completely on your own. You can't change that physically within yourself. That's something that you have to seek external resources for. And again, like Hannah said, especially in Caribbean culture, the first thing that we turn to is religion. It's always, if something's wrong, you have to turn towards religion. And it's not you want to, it's pushed on by the society that you must turn to religion. And then that's why there's so many people who are from the Caribbean who deal with mental health issues. They separate themselves from the church and completely distance themselves away because of the fact that it was pushed so heavily onto them and they ended up receiving negative effects from it, that now they're only going to associate negativity with religion, and therefore they want to push themselves as far away from that negativity as they physically can. I know personally for myself, my church back in New York, that's where my family lives, back in New York, and I haven't been able to find one down here, but what they would do is they would take written passages from the Bible and they wouldn't tell you to just take it as is. They would give you, their own personal interpretation of it and how it can be applied in the modern society. And they would just leave you with that and say, you know what, even though this is what I think, take it as your own, do with it as your own, and interpret it as your own. And therefore you're able to apply it more deeply to yourself so that you can have a greater understanding. And, it's things like that, where if you find a passage in a religious text that really speaks to you and you're like, wow, like I feel so much better about, my outlook on life. I have a more positive outlook on life. And I, feel like I'm doing much better. I feel like, the things that were bothering me before mentally are not as concerning to me anymore. That's when that, religion, I guess, in that sense, has done its purpose, and in, that specific situation to aid your mental health. But that doesn't mean that your mental health problems have completely gone away. It just means you have found a solution in that moment. So I think, again, it just has to do with that combination of taking, if you choose to, taking, religious texts and applying it to yourself for mental health, but also seeking additional resources too. Just because the key fits in one door doesn't mean that key won't fit in another door. So it's kind of like taking that.
It's a great metaphor. Yes. And I love this kind of conversation around just religion, the church, spirituality among BIPOC communities, because I think that could be like a great future panel if you guys are interested. But to touch on, I think Hannah was the one who brought this up of, there is a lot of history as to why many Caribbean and Hispanic communities rely on religion, and it was for a long time our only source of comfort and coping. And so it served a purpose for our parents, our grandparents, and a lot of our generations prior. And so for the longest, it's kind of what the only tools and resources that we had. There probably wasn't really the equivalent, even in some indigenous communities, they don't necessarily have a therapist, but they have an elder or like a spiritual leader. And that's that person that they, will go to help with any sort of illness or just difficulties. And so, the term is different in different communities and different generations. And so I think, that definitely has translated and continued into why there is such this heavy tie on any problems. We pray about it, we go to church. But as you all have mentioned, sometimes it's not enough, and we do need that additional support or that kind of additional help. And that is where talking to a mental health professional is really important. So I really love that kind of connection and discussion that you guys are able to have just there. Candace, I see you have a hand up. You have a question
Hi.
or comment?
It's nice to meet you. So I was just, okay, there we go. Hi. So I was just going to comment on the religion thing. My family is also from the Caribbean, mainly Trinidad. And so I definitely have seen a lot of sides of the spectrum in the religiosity aspect. I have had issues with depression in the past, depression and then suicidal ideation, unfortunately. And so is my mom. In her past, and she was raised as a Catholic, and not anymore because it just hasn't been working for her. And we definitely have members of the family who would rather us just again push it down, that kind of trauma response. If it's not God, then it's not going to work for you. and then there's a lot of that in the media as well, which is why I feel that it's important for us for there to be more discussions like this, where we can say to others that, Jesus isn't necessarily the problem with me, and he doesn't have to be every solution. Sometimes he can, put faith in me to help myself, kind of frame it like that. And also I am also a mixed race person because, my mom's side is the Caribbean side, and then my dad's side is white. And so in the worst of the suicidal ideation for me, there was a lot of kind of subconscious blame on my dad and just kind of America in general, thinking that, they were both feeding me negative thoughts, and that, the Western solutions, it was all, just propaganda by white people. That's gotten better, but unfortunately I've seen two sides of it, because you have my uncle who has had a very rough childhood, and I do suspect he may have bipolar disorder, but he hasn't been treated for that because he's been taught all of his life to be the manlier person in the family and to provide and, just to keep surviving. And that's kind of damaged his relationships over the years. And so he's still not really getting it with the details of the mental health issues that my family has suffered with. And so, we're still trying to work with him on that. But again, he still loves us, so he's trying his best. And then we have my gran, who is definitely very religious. She loves us very much and definitely wants to show us. But sometimes that comes in the form of like trying to do, again, the pushing religiosity as the tell-all be-all cure for all of these issues. And so we're not very super religious. We believe in the whole, we believe in God, but just the practice part has been difficult for us, especially as a mixed race family living in the South. It's hard to find churches that will support our identity and not try and like divide us or tokenize either one of my parents. And so, it's Gran definitely sees that and kind of notes that and thinks that, we just need more Jesus in our life. But I've been able to talk to her more about the details of what issues I'm going through. I'm sorry. Just super nervous. And so she's definitely been more open to discussion about it, and she's learning that about the roots of the issues, and that I am okay. I am able to do this without, pushing so heavily into the church. It's a slow process with the both of them. But I definitely, the discussions like this really are important, because, there's so much media either, focusing heavily on the religiosity in mental health, or, pushing religions to kind of demonizing religions in this aspect. But sorry, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Candace. And like, I really appreciate everything that you shared. And I even see a common theme, it seems like, of ways in which you all have been able to, just due to this greater acceptance of mental health and awareness of, hey, this is some important stuff that we have to talk about, that you all are able to talk to the older generation in your family and increase awareness, kind of like normalize, try to help to reduce that stigma, which, as Candace was saying, it's really important to have these conversations. And the more we have it, the more comfortable we feel, and the more kind of perhaps we can work on changing or adapting our older generation in our family, their perceptions about mental health. Wynsome, did you have something that you were gonna add or say?
I was actually jumping off to say that Candace had her hand up, but no, I just want to jump in to say that this conversation is so fruitful, right? And I think that when we can begin this level of conversation on this level, in this academic space, I think it is so beneficial because it really does challenge the systems that we grew up in, right? And it challenges the way that we evolve as individuals. And so I'm just super proud of everyone for really like diving in and really sharing from an authentic place. The impact that these cultural norms, these religious norms have had on us as individuals, and the efforts that we take in order to make sure that we are prioritizing our mental health. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I say something with that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I agree 1,000% with Wynsome, and what you were saying as well. Candace, did I say it right?
It's Cadence.
Cadence.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
Cadence. I was gonna say cadence, and I was like, is that what it was?
That's
Cadence,
it's
right?
just think of the word.
So I agree. I think cadence, right? I think I agree completely. I think that these, and I might be a little off the mark with this, but it feels like these kinds of conversations obviously don't happen. It's like a novel occurrence. It feels like, and I feel like it's kind of like a rebellion. Like the way I see it, it feels like it's this kind of activity is in opposition of what we're supposed to do. It feels like so much of what our life is supposed to be as an American, is like you're supposed to be told how you're supposed to feel. Like the news comes with these political opinions infused into the news that just tell you basically how to feel. And so much stuff is just kind of thrown at you, like the education system or religion, like you guys keep saying. And it feels like it's just so much is thrown at you and you're just told how to feel and how to act. And you've got these fears of social criticism or whatever type of fear, incentivizing you to follow the herd. And the reason I say that this sounds like it's just like a just rebellion is because like it's like we're not supposed to have these discussions. It's not ever, a normal idea that's out and that's like widespread that we should question the systems in which we're underneath. But I think that I agree with you guys that it's valuable, and that in doing it you uncover ways in which we can think and do better.
Yeah. Cadence and then Hannah.
I see it less of a rebellion. I do understand where you're coming from, but I feel like if you are, helping these older generations to have these conversations, I feel it's almost more trusting and kind of, compassionate, I guess.
Right now, I can see, because I know I use that word and it kind of has like aggressive undertone, so I can see where you.
No, I get it.
Word.
I feel like it's important because, if you trust someone enough to talk to them and show them that what they're doing is potentially harmful to some people, that's showing that you really do care about how they interact with others in the world and how they may perceive themselves in the future. And I feel like it's really helpful and caring, and it shows that you love them. Sorry, that was redundant. I'm sorry, I'm going in circles.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. It's more caring than what I'm thinking.
Because you're trusting, you're showing that you believe that they can comprehend what is going on with the situation, and you also trust them enough to care for you and themselves. Yeah.
Make a change. Okay.
Hannah, go ahead.
I almost forgot I had my hand raised. I'm so sorry. Like the conversation. For me personally, to piggyback off of what Javon said, in the sense where it's like liberating conversations that people shy away from. I think a lot of people are, and what COVID made many people that I interact with and talk with realize is self-awareness. And it's okay to be transparent. I've always been transparent growing up, and growing up and as a Caribbean, they're always like, home business stays home, don't run your mouth too much, all of this stuff. But me, if I'm mentally not my best, I will tell somebody like I'm not doing well. Tierra is a good friend of mine. It's outside of school as well. So she knows the ins and outs when it comes to me sometimes. And I'm very transparent on like anybody, for instance, like, and I think that's what some people are shy from, or like they have to still realize and recognize with themselves that there's no shame in being transparent and open. I think a lot of people are scared of being vulnerable, because with being vulnerable comes like backlash. You open yourself up to a lot more, but it just opens the room for a lot more other things that people don't see. Like for me, being vulnerable gives me space to like, whew, okay, I got that off my chest. Now I know there's people that know what I'm going through. They kind of understand, or they could kind of like give me some type of guidance and help. And I think with these conversations, that's what it is. It's like we need more people that are okay to be vulnerable and transparent.
Yes. I was actually thinking, like, you know, I like both Cadence and Javon's point of, I do think it can be a little bit of both, of having spaces like this is, we are acting in a sense of rebellion, in a sense of these spaces were not often created for us. Like we often have to create spaces like this, like have to advocate to have a time and a space where we can come together as communities or people of color and talk about things that impact us, like advocate for ourselves. And that's stuff that we have to kind of fight for and do for. And also it can be because I love you, mother, grandmother, sister, cousin, whoever, I want to like talk about maybe things that seem to be hurtful or harmful for you. And so, you know, it kind of can exist in both of I'm doing this out of love and can be out of compassion, and also realizing, hey, maybe societies, these certain systems that we're in don't really want us to be talking about this or change our perspectives. And so I kind of agree with Wynsome of like the fact that you all like showed up tonight and are expressing just these levels of vulnerability and conversations, I think is really remarkable, and is you're working towards creating change among your communities, among your organizations, and in your families as well. So, Hingo, I know we have just a few minutes left. This conversation was just thriving. Something I wanted to kind of jump to a little bit is, I've already kind of heard a little bit of you guys talking about just the different parts of our identities. And I like to incorporate and talk about intersectionality a lot when we do come together and talk about things that impact people of color, because although our race hugely impacts how we show up in spaces in the world, it's not the only part of our identity. And some of you all talked about how the role of your spirituality or religious identity can play a role at times, even your own like ethnicity, like cultural background. And so just to provide sort of a foundation or definition of intersectionality, essentially describes different systems of inequality that mutually overlap, that can impact our lived experience in the world. And so like these systems are often can refer to like our race, our gender, our sexuality, our ability status, our religious identity, nationality. And so for example, I show up and exist in the world not just as a Black woman or Black individual, but a Black woman, a Black cisgender woman, Black cisgender heterosexual woman. And so depending on, the different ways in which these systems of oppression can impact me as a Black individual or as a woman, they coexist, and they are often existing and overlapping. And so I'm curious if like you all have ever experienced or can think of ways in which your own identities, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, how maybe they show up in the world that you navigate, and how they may impact your mental health, if at all. Lots of hands, lots of hands. Tierra, let's hear from you first, and then we can kind of go down.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably impacted me more in a workplace setting. Not really recently in my school setting, just because on campus I'm pretty active. And I would just say in a workplace setting, when you're in an environment where a majority of your coworkers identify as Caucasian and majority of them are males, it's kind of a bit intimidating as not only a Black individual, but a Black female who does like their ideas, shared and heard. So I think for me, it was just finding everybody's communication styles and being effective in my communication, making sure that my voice is heard, because I'm not necessarily a shy individual, but I'm also not the boldest person in the world as well. So I'm trying to find that middle between, not overstepping somebody who's in the workforce superior than me, but at the same time, making sure that, my voice is still heard when I'm in the work environment. So I think that's, something that I had challenged in the past, not in the present, but definitely in the past. And I just think I navigated through that just by listening and then responding. And just, how I share it, how I word it, people take words, very seriously nowadays. So it's just all about, the thought and the intention behind it. So I think that is one of a good example. Right now, I think I'm a lot better at it, speaking, when not only just being asked, like speaking before somebody has to ask me a question, basically. So I think that's an example for me in my experience.
Thank you for sharing that, Tierra. And I know you didn't quite say this, but as you were talking, I was even thinking about, I can relate to that aspect of showing up as a Black woman in the workforce and trying to navigate with wanting to speak up for yourself, but not wanting to be perceived as the stereotype that's often placed on Black women, and how sometimes that impacts whether I feel confident in myself in the workplace, and maybe not wanting to be overly confident. And so I think you kind of articulated or, kind of drop those gems of some of those nuances that can impact us as individuals, and it can impact our mental health.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Ryan, what about you?
For myself, not only am I a Hispanic man, I'm also a homosexual, cisgender man. So for me, I've pretty much been getting it from all sides since I was born, particularly after my parents had moved, to New York. We lived in a very highly concentrated Caucasian town, where we were quite literally what is known as one of the few railroad track towns that still exists in the United States, where we do essentially what the people who are fighting like myself in my town to change is we call our town legal segregation, because of the fact that it is quite literally a set of railroad tracks. My school district and my high school, I went to a 93% white high school. The high school that is across the railroad tracks is 93% Black and Hispanic students. There is less than 3 miles between our schools. To put that in perspective of just how severe it is in my town. I remember, I think the first time that it had really hit me, I guess when I moved to Florida, because I was a really, really quiet and reserved person in New York because of the fact that I was scared to speak up because I didn't know what was going to happen if I did speak up. And I was frequently targeted in high school, whether it being getting called racial slurs in the hallways, homophobic slurs in the hallways. It was a very scary time to try to speak up for yourself because of the fact that if you spoke up a little too loud, you're the problem now. And the instant that became apparent to me was actually when I moved to South Florida. And I had started at a new job, and for the sake of me not trying to get sued by them, I will not say the name of this place, but it's somewhere in Broward County. And I remember I had gone into work, and I know that I can come off as very intimidating. I'm 6'3". I have a bunch of tattoos all over my arms. And unfortunately, in the United States, I'm a Hispanic man, so that automatically makes me a suspect. And I remember I'd gone to my job, and there was just a day I wasn't having a good day. And I had made that known to everyone when I walked in. I said, hey, not really feeling today. I'm just letting you guys know, just in case, I'm more quiet and more reserved than typically. I just kind of want to be left alone today. I don't really, want to interact too much. And it was kind of this, what was forced upon me was that I had to be happy, and I didn't have a choice. It was, oh, you look like you need a hug. No, I really don't want to be touched right now. I would actually really appreciate it if you didn't touch me. No, you need a hug. No, I actually would rather you get away from me. That would actually make my day so much better. And it got to the point where I was sitting down and I stood up and I said, please back up from me. I'm asking you to leave me alone. That day, I was one of 6 people who were on staff. 4 out of the 6 people on staff filed a complaint against me stating that I was aggressive and intimidating because I asked them to get back from me and I told them to get away from me. And that was the moment where I realized that they only look at me as a stereotype, especially as a gay man. They want me to be, you know, I guess the only way I can say it is kind of like in pop culture type terms, and I don't really have a professional way to say it, but they want to be like just very much kikiing with them and like, you know, they're like, oh, like that's the girlies. But I don't like being viewed as that stereotype because of the fact that I'm not just a gay man. I am somebody who is the first in his entire family to go to college. I'm somebody who's paying my rent, paying my bills, working and making sure I could do that. I'm somebody who's building my own future. I'm not just the gay Hispanic kid who started working at your job, who you can now use for your own enjoyment. And it became like that. And I worked there for 9 months straight of just constantly having people say racist jokes at work, and I wasn't allowed to speak up about them because of the fact that I was going to be viewed as aggressive. Over the time that I'd worked there in 9 months, I had, I believe it was a total of 11 complaints filed against me. And all 11 were situations in which I asked for my boundaries to be respected. And the final time in which I asked for my boundaries to be respected and I spoke up about the racist jokes, I was fired 5 days later without reason, actually. And that was also, to put in perspective, a few days before the next paycheck, which was also the last paycheck before rent was due.
Wow.
And when I told them that and, you know, asked them, I was like, you know, even if you just give me one more shift, at the very least, I'll take that. They laughed in my face and that was it. And I was forced to leave my job and that was all I could do at the time. And, you know, since I was a kid, you know, I've known I was gay since I was a young kid. Like they always say that, you know, which ones are the ones. And I was one of those kids that you knew, like I was one of the ones. And even though it is based off of stereotypes, I mean, they weren't really wrong. So, but still, it's kind of something that's been imposed on me, whether it be, you know, being told to speak English in a Walmart, or, you know, when I'm hanging out with my friends and I speak Spanish because my first language is Spanish. And there are situations where I feel more comfortable speaking Spanish than English.
Absolutely.
And, you know, being called, you know, racial slur just because of the fact that I asked my friend what they bought, but I said it in Spanish. Or, you know, I got pulled over in my town. And the only reason that I was pulled over was to quote that officer who pulled me over that day, "You look suspicious." And that was the only reason as to why I was being pulled over in my town. Because after I gave him my license, he let me go. And he just told me, he said, and I quote, "I suggest you get home." So it's things like that that I've been exposed to since I was so young, that I'm a champion not only for people who are like me, but for everyone, because if we're not all winning, then nobody is winning. Especially in the United States, when you have such a large population of people of color, you have such large population of women in this country who are not being paid the same, being treated the same, or just not even being held to the same level. And for me to say that I'm focusing only on Hispanic and gay problems, that's not right. Because I know that we don't even have it the worst. And that's truthful and that's honest. And that's where I'm going to acknowledge my privilege in knowing that I do not have it the worst in this country, especially because of the fact that I'm a lighter skin tone. I know I do not have it worse in this country. I know that there are plenty of people, not only in the United States, but in the Caribbean and all over the world, who simply for the color of the skin or whether the fact that they're a woman or a man face so much discrimination, so much hate, and are killed for it. I know that I am not at that level. But what I am going to do is I'm going to use my privilege to fight for those people. And that's how we bring in intersectionality, because of the fact that in order to be intersectional, you as an individual have to acknowledge your privilege and say, what can I do with my privilege to make sure that not only my voice is heard, but the people who can't even speak up for themselves, make sure that their inner voice is also being heard too. And that's how you bring intersectional problems to intersectional solutions.
Yes, all the snaps. Well said, well said. I see 2 hands raised, but I'm also aware of the time. And so I don't know what you all would like to do, Justine, what we are allowed to do, but I know it's almost 7. And so,
Can I ask a quick question? And I'm only, I know you people have their hands up before me. My phone with the doctor. I wanted to just ask this quickly. How often do these meetings happen?
that's a great
I
question.
want to just.
It sounds like we need
I
to have another.
I can jump
another.
in for that. So to answer your question, Jovan, this was the first time that I've done something like this with Pep Talk. This is actually our first kind of like event even though it's online for the semester. But I really have been listening to your conversation, and I think if, you know, if we talked about this after, maybe making this more regular, or any way I could support you guys and maybe making this like a group meeting that you guys could have like more often, like maybe in person, because I know that Hannah, you mentioned that. So yeah,
Please.
great. Yeah, no, so if that's something you want to do, okay, yeah, podcast, or if you guys want to have an in-person meeting, like let me know how I can support you.
Okay.
That would be great to do once a week.
I could get you guys to,
I don't know what people's commitment to do once a week, but
Ugh.
Maybe bi-weekly.
feasible.
Bi-weekly for me.
I figured out I can hook you guys up. I used to be in the university press, so I know the whole student media. I'll DM you guys about it in the group chat that we have for this. And then as far as time goes, it is 7, but like I said, I think you guys are having a super important conversation, so it is totally up to you if you guys want to continue it.
Well, I mean, I heard maybe we can like have like maybe 5 more minutes. Vania, I know I saw your hand raised and I wanted to hear from you. So we can kind of hear from you, and then Hannah, and then we can kind of do a final wrap up. Sound good?
Okay, yeah. So, well, I would say, well, I am a Black woman, and I would say that I experience like from every angle, whether it's ageism, racism, the genderism, and I find myself like, well, as Hannah mentioned before, that she was an outspoken girl since she was little. I was the opposite. I would just bury my feelings. Hopefully somebody would see my face and ask me what's wrong. That never happened. And so I always found myself, you know, never saying how I truly felt, because A, I would hurt another person's feelings, even though they would hurt mine, that would be okay. And yeah, even now in school, I'm finding out like the things that I say, even it could be something normal or just a simple question. After the question is asked, I get told, oh, that's being aggressive, or look at her, she's just, who does she think she is? And you can't even be confident. That's what I find like just the most like, I could say it's destructive to my self-esteem, because, you know, for me, I'm a person like I love to help people. I just have a love to you know, see people thrive, and I also have a love for knowledge. So I ask a lot of questions, and I just genuinely want to know things. And in turn, I get, oh, being aggressive, or she's too demanding, she's too confident.
Yeah.
And I would be amiss if I told you like those words didn't hurt, or, you know, they didn't affect me in any way. I would say ageism as well. I am a lot older than my peers. So sometimes it's like, okay, well, if we say this, will she get it? Or we don't want to invite her to that because, you know, she has this going on. And that even happened in work as well. When I worked before, I was a lot younger than my coworkers, but I did have a lot of passion and drive. And maybe that was intimidation on their part. But in my eyes, I didn't think nothing about that. I just felt like, well, why are you keeping me out? I'm on the outside. Why can't you just let me in? I just want to be your friend. So yeah, you know, a little bit about what Ryan was talking about as well. You know, you're just not allowed to be you. And I just find that like so unfair, to put it plainly, unfair, because you're not fitting in this stereotypical box of what people just expect you to be. And yeah, that's it. Oh, what I was gonna say, sorry. Sometimes I feel like, well, when I'm voicing my opinions or thoughts, just as how everyone else does, I get the feeling that, you know, we touched on this a bit, but I feel like I'm the angry Black woman, or like when people want to, challenge me, they're waiting for my reaction so they can get the angry Black woman that they want and officially call me that, even though they were being aggressive with me. So I'm finding being in those spaces are extremely difficult. And I would say like attending CAPS with the clinicians that we have there is really rewarding, because sometimes you're just, I can speak on my end. Sometimes I just really don't understand why things happen the way that they do. And when I'm with my clinician, I just get a little bit understanding of how to handle people that are difficult, and how can I heal the inner child of me, because like I keep saying, it is something that's hurtful, but it's also something not really talked about, especially in the Black community, amongst Black women. Like, I think that we try to pretend that the angry Black woman is just this monster, or it's not supposed to come out. And I don't believe in the angry Black woman, even though we do have a lot to be angry about. I believe in the confident Black woman. I believe in the Black woman that says, respect my boundaries. This is it, and you're playing on my boundaries. Even if just saying that, you get told these hurtful things.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to type, but then I was like, no, I'm gonna just wait and say it. I often experience and have seen that Black women, and often it starts from young, like Black girls aren't allowed to be confident. And if you're too confident or too outspoken, it is misinterpreted or misguided as being aggressive, or you're being too much. And that's often how it kind of starts, of feeling like we gotta dim ourselves down, just kind of make ourselves smaller. And yeah, it is very unfortunate that that is something that is placed upon us, that we're not allowed to have those big emotions, which anger is just an emotion. Hannah.
I had to take a minute because you guys almost brought me to tears because of everything else I'm dealing with. Hold on. So sorry.
You can take a minute. And I think that just speaks to how powerful these conversations are, right? Like, even it's like being able to hear our own experience or similar experience. And so I'm really hopeful, and I love that it sounds like there's moves in the works to try to make this happen again or more frequently, because it sounds like this can be really helpful for the community at large.
Jodie, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Where do you think these societal constructs come from? Like, they're just so deeply rooted. Where do you think they come from?
Oh man, Ricky, how long do we have? I don't know if we have time for in depth. But I personally, the way I understand of a lot of these societal constructs is that a lot of it is rooted in the systemic oppression of how this, not just the US, but I think this is a global thing. And so if we pick apart certain constructs looking at power and privilege and who is made to have power, they're often, and so it typically boils down to white men or older white men, who tend to have, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this because of the HB 7 bill, but historically there have been certain groups that have had more power than, or access than other individuals, and they're the ones who are often creating these laws and rules and attitudes that are often boiled down to what's even in our textbooks, what we see in media, what we see in, in our day-to-day. And so like earlier when I think we were talking about like how even having spaces like this is an act of rebellion, I see that because often how America was even constructed or founded, Black individuals weren't even allowed to read. We weren't even allowed to gather safely. And so and that was because of just the way certain groups of individuals were like forcing us to think less of ourselves, to be enslaved, and to go through a lot of these oppressive systems. And those persons who are in power are also the ones who are creating these rules and these laws and policies that affect society at large. And so a lot of it does come to unlearning. That's why even the conversation about religion, how we were saying earlier, how it was a source of coping and strength and safety for us. But then we realized at a certain point, it's not enough for us anymore just to rely on that. And so it does take a lot of learning and growth and realizing, hey, maybe what was once the norm is no longer the norm, or is no longer the status quo or okay. But yeah, I think it stems from a historical issue that goes very far back, unfortunately. Tierra, I see you had a hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add, first of all, I'm enjoying the conversation. I just think it's so important to note that we should really lean on the communities that, emphasize mental health. I think like right now we're at a point where like there's a lot of resources provided to aid towards mental health, not just for college students, but, just people in general, and the resources are not really being used. For example, CAPS is on campus. In the past at general body meetings and other events, I've shared these resources with college students and just peers and friends, and you can tell them all you want about the resources offered, but it's going to be up to them to take it. So I think it's important to just continue to share the opportunities and resources that are available and, readily available for use, because I know me personally, I like to address my mental health and keep it pushing, but sometimes you can't just keep it pushing. Sometimes you have to really like stop and think, what's really going on? Like, what are my next steps? How am I going to deal with this? So I think using those resources that are not only provided in a college campus, but in a general setting is important to use. And I know there's some situations where everybody can't afford a therapist, but in some situations, I really think you can get free therapy by just leaning on the ones that you love and finding comfort in conversation and just support. So that's why I really think if you can't even, use a resource that may require financial assistance, or, you attending something in person or talking to somebody over a call, just call up somebody that you can trust, or, that will provide that support. And I think that can continue to help grow within our mental health.
Yes, agree.
Okay, guys, sorry. But to continue on to Ryan and Vania's experience, for me, I think I realized that oh gosh, how can I word this? As a Haitian American, as a loud Black woman, as a straight Black woman, as an honest, like, it's just so many personalities for me that come into play. And in the spaces I grew up in, that it took a long time. And I think COVID started it for me to recognize like my mental health is a priority, and to prioritize my mental health and how to go about prioritizing my mental health more. And also that it is okay for me to be loud. It is okay for me to be aggressive about the things that I'm passionate about. My mom, as a higher educator, for some reason always thought like putting us in white spaces was the way to go to help us progress in life. So it was always the best white schools, the best white middle schools, the best white. And then growing up in South Florida, I'm a Palm Beach native. So it was like I'm around a lot of Hispanics, I'm around a lot of Caribbeans, and I'm around a lot of just Black Americans more than my white colleagues. But when I go to class, I'm literally one of 2 Black people in my classes growing up, maybe the only one. And I've had situations constantly where I was always being reported to the principal's office because of my comments with the teachers or with colleagues or classmates and things like that, for how I would stick up for myself against certain comments and certain aspects. And I think even today, and in this conversation alone, it just made me realize how much I'm still healing from all of that I've grown up with, constantly hearing that I'm too loud, you're too aggressive, you're rude, like based off of how I come off and I say things, even in the workspace, because I know Tierra touched on the workspace. My workspace is predominantly Caucasian, and I have an employer, my pharmacy manager, every day. Like, it was the first time I walked into a job recently, and I've seen a lot of like Haitian colleagues, And I promise you, he's getting rid of every last one. A lot of times it's now a lot more white colleagues again, or even Middle Eastern colleagues like that look like him and reflect him more. And it just puts me in a predicament where I go into work every other day and I know my position is no longer safe. And I think it's a lot of times we're dealing with customers that are entitled, like the Boca area alone made me realize that. I've dealt with a lot of customers that grew up on entitlement and grew up on certain things. So there's just certain ways they will talk to me or my colleagues, and we are forced to no longer, it's like we cannot react because they're looking for like that angry Black woman. And it's like we can't show them, but it's like at some point I'm human just as you're human. We share the same, not share the same blood, but you know, you bleed red just as I bleed red. So it's like I will no longer continue to take your disrespect. And I think that's what they continue to look for, is for people that would sit there and take their disrespect. So when Ryan was speaking about his experience, I think I felt that a little bit more personal, because it's like, I've been put in predicaments where I've been told to shut up and just take the disrespect or be the bigger person. And it's not about being the bigger person, it's about respecting my boundaries and what I set forward. If I don't approach you like that and direct you like that, I just don't expect the same for myself. And I think as a Black woman in America, it's hard to find that space. For me personally, I found like my coping mechanism is like my friends and my community. And I kind of shield myself from white spaces, especially being at FAU, like we're a diverse school, but I find myself in my classes like I'm one of few Black kids in the class. So I still look for my Black community as my Black safe space still. And I think even then it's troublesome, because it's like you're still trying to identify and heal yourself within the community. And you're still looking for support. And it's like we're all doing the same challenges, but you're still looking back upon when you have to put on that professional setting, because you cannot be who you are. Like it was stated before. And me, I always want to be an honest and transparent person about who I am. So I always find myself battling, okay, professionalism, my definition of professionalism, and then the other standard and other definition of professionalism.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your truth, Hannah. And I appreciate that you have found, you know, that courage and that kind of confidence to be able to show up as you are and authentically, and feel like you can, you know, be that confident, that loud woman in those spaces. I think that's important and that's valuable, to be able to show up as you are. And I really loved what you were kind of saying at the end of how you were able to find your community and find your space. I think that is really valuable. And I'd love to maybe like wrap up with that, but I do see Wynsome, you might have something you want to add.
No, I just wanted to just kind of reiterate the importance of utilizing the services that we do have available to us, right?
Yeah.
Just want to say, as far as CAPS goes, that we've been really intentional to ensure that we provide services, right, from the perspective that we are culturally responsive in the way in which we interact with the students here at FAU. And so, as you all were talking about even the angry Black woman kind of situation, it causes me to think about the importance of being able to even receive counseling from individuals who share in that cultural construct, right? Because it's so challenging when you have to try to educate the individuals that are there to provide you with therapeutic support, right? And so I'm just grateful again that we're able to have this conversation, but even the more grateful that CAPS is doing their due diligence in ensuring that you can sit in front of individuals who identify with you culturally and can meet you at this space without re-traumatizing or, you know, asking all these questions and you have to educate them, but individuals that share in that struggle, share in that understanding. So again, that's all I wanted to say. This has been like so fruitful, and I can't wait to see, you know, how and in what ways we expand on this.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. And I just wanted to share some, just like, if I know some of you had mentioned that you've utilized our services before. And, you know, I think that I would definitely take advantage of this free resource that you have on campus. And also just want to plug an opportunity for some of the groups that we have. And so I did put the link in the chat So we have two groups actually. For one is for students of color, so it don't just have to be Black, but anyone who identifies as a person of color. And then we have another group for Black students. It's called our Black Healing and Empowerment Group. And so both groups are we call them support groups. And so they just offer a kind of safe therapeutic space for students who identified either one of those groups to be able to discuss and like talk about whether it's their challenges as a person of color or it's their challenges at FAU or at work, or just need that kind of safe space for being able to talk about what's going on in your life. But kind of like as Winsome was saying, within a group and having a group therapist, a facilitator who shares similar identities and can kind of understand what you're going through, have that awareness where you're not having to teach them or catch them up to speed. And so I would encourage you to check out those two groups. We also have other groups as well that might be of interest, but going along with what Hannah was saying about being able to find that support, find that community, I do think it is important for us to think of different ways in which, whether it is through CAPS, whether it is through finding our group, like getting connected to groups on campus, such as like the NAACP, BSA, Caribbean Student Association, but finding those plugs, those areas on campus where you can feel like, okay, this is a safe space. I have that outlet, that resource. I think it's really important. Ryan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just like two really quick things, like obviously as we were wrapping up. Obviously not everybody in this group is a person of color in terms of like all participants and attendees, at least as far as I know, or may not identify as a person of color, whatever the situation may be. However, as a person of color, and I'm sure that other people have also experienced this, it is really easy to feel like whenever something really good comes your way, that you don't deserve it or that you are just lucky to have that. I know for myself, when I got into my original university, I was accepted into a top program that's ranked up really high in the United States. And I was told by multiple people that I was really lucky that I got in. Like really lucky. That was all it was. It wasn't because I worked hard. It wasn't because I put in the work to get there. It was because I was really lucky to end up there. And one of my favorite quotes that has ever been said, actually by my sister-in-law, before she became my sister-in-law, is, "You are never lucky to end up in the space that you are in. You are there for a reason. You applied to be there. Whatever the situation may be, you ended up there. Take up the space that you deserve to take up." Just because you're there doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taking up that space. It's that fear that if you do take up too much space, you're going to be ousted or you're going to be removed because of the fact that now you're threatening the natural course of the environment, or quote unquote natural course of the environment. None of us are lucky to have ended up where we ended up. None of us are lucky to have ended up at Florida Atlantic University. None of us are lucky to be the age that we are, growing up where we are, getting the education that we are. We are there because we put ourselves into those situations because we worked hard to get into those situations. Don't treat it as if it's just luck. Treat it as if you earned it, because you did. And then the second thing I would say is, especially for myself, being the first in my family to ever go to college, it's really easy to find any kind of mishap or any kind of small step to be the end of the world, or just feel like you have the world's weight sitting on you. One thing that I always tell myself, and it actually puts me at ease a lot, and I've started telling it to other people, is just remember the fact that you are achieving your ancestors' wildest dreams. At some point in your lineage, there were people who were not able to go to school, not able to live freely, whatever the situation may have been. You are living their wildest dreams. You are doing everything that they had put in the work so that you would be able to attain one day. So just always hold your head up high. Know that there is power in your culture, power in your heritage, and power in who you are as an individual, and strive for the utmost success and prove everyone wrong.
Go off, Ryan. Go off.
A message.
Okay. Message, affirmations, gems, all of it dropped. Yes, I love it. So it seems like we've come to the end of our conversation this evening. Again, I just really love that we were able to have the space to meet and gather and to talk about these just really important topics and issues that impact our community and just us as individuals and our families. I hope that we can continue to have this. Thank you to Justine and Pep Talk for kind of facilitating this and organizing this. Hopefully we can continue to have similar panels or events like this and the conversations. Yeah.
And can we